Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Fortis Impact Talk. On this week's show, we're going to take a closer look at the retail end of buying a firearm. So I got into contact with Luqman Manjra, a gun shop owner from KZN, to give us a little bit of insight with his years of experience behind the counter of what's trending, what to look for when buying a firearm.
And it's a hard conversation to have.
Not everybody can just get on a plane and leave. People just think proactive, just not reactive.
How are you doing?
Good, thanks, man. Thank you for the invite. I'm doing well as you can do under level 4 lockdown, but dealing with it.
Luqman, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did all this start for you?
So currently, right now, I have my own firearm dealership down in Durban, and I want to say it's been a long life passion of mine. But I only really kind of got involved when I was of legal age. Obviously for legal reasons. Prior to that, I would say my involvement with firearms specifically was not much, as opposed to other forms of combat, if I can say that. Martial arts, a lot of knife training, impact weapon. I've always been a student of martial arts, so it kind of just grew from there, from a young age. The passion grew with karate, kickboxing, and mixed martial arts, and from there it just kind of grew. I've always had this passion for combat, self-defense, that type of thing. And I think that the gradual progression from a sport-based or artistic-based, passion, it went on to something that was much more practical. Especially living in a country like South Africa, it's a necessity, in my opinion, to be owning a firearm and to know how to use it. And just as a passion, it became a sideline thing, owning firearms and going to the range or attending training courses, and it just grew from there. And one thing led to the next, and here we are today.
Fantastic, man. So, I remember beforehand we spoke. You said that you worked in a firearm shop at some point.
Yes, I did. So how we got to that point was I was kind of in between jobs a couple of years ago, and at this point I was already, I would say, I was really into firearms. I had a full-time job somewhere else, and that was a very demanding job. It was 7 days a week. I was managing a service station, and during my free time, I found myself on the shooting range, either attending courses, attending sport shooting events, or taking people to the range. It became a thing when, as the more involved I got into this industry, the more people around me started, looking closer into it and asking questions. They'd be like, "Listen, how do you go about getting a license, or how do you go about going to the shooting range and shooting?" And it just kind of grew from there. Where I was like, "Listen, well, I'm happy to take you guys to the range and you get a feel for it." And it's just, I'm the type of person where if I enjoy something, I want other people around me to also enjoy what I'm doing. And it started off with family and friends asking me to take them to the range, and I would just start off by like, "Listen, okay, guys, these are the basic safeties, these are the basic fundamentals," and that's kind of where it began for me. Although the thought did cross my mind, I don't know why I never really thought about making it a priority. I always thought, like, it's a passion and it's a sideline thing. It's a weekend type of thing. Let's keep it that way. But he offered me my first opportunity to actually work in the industry, and his actual words were like, "Listen, you're passionate about your stuff. You know a little bit, and we can teach you some more. Let's do it." And that was my first entry into the industry. So about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, got my first job in a gun shop, and it was a lot of highs and lows. Unfortunately, during my time there, Mike passed on due to an unfortunate accident. But I stayed on, and shortly after that, I decided, listen, I think maybe it's time for me to leave. And from there onwards, I began the process of going my own way and paving my own path. And it's a long road to get here, but got here eventually. And learned a lot in the industry, meeting people, learning about the networks, learning about the products, learning about the suppliers, learning about the clients, learning about what people are looking for, learning about what the people needs are, and kind of just putting it all together. There's the sales side, there's the training side, and just merging all of it together was a nice thing for me to see it all kind of grow into one.
Well, you also do training at this point. Well, not now, but you're also involved in giving fundamentals training on firearms.
Yes, I do. So during my time working at the shop, I was fortunate enough to attend an instructor's course up in Joburg. So I've got the official qualification for whatever it's worth as an instructor. Like I said, prior to my official qualification, I was taking people to the range. I was teaching people and making people more aware of these type of things. But it was really beneficial for me to actually go on a course where they actually teach you methods on how to teach people. They teach you techniques. They actually it pushes your skill level to a certain point. So if you have to be at a certain skill level to be able to teach another person, for anything, not just firearm related, you have to be at a certain level. So learning techniques on how to teach people, learning the theoretical side of education, pushing yourself physically in terms of your own skill levels, it was quite good. After getting that instructor qualification, it really added a lot of perspective in terms of how I would go about teaching. And from then onwards, I would continue teaching, and it then grew into something where I said, I think it's about time I actually put something official down, because up until this point, it was a lot of just taking people to the range who were mostly first-time shooters, and I would allow them the opportunity to shoot different types of weapons. Now, most of these people who were coming with me, or family or friends, or even friends of friends, they considered this visit to the shooting range almost like an extreme sport. People would do something like bungee jumping or skydiving, and this was something that was an extreme sport to them. A few of them would take it on further, but most of them were like, listen, okay, we'll do this once and get a feel for it. But it broke a lot of barriers. A lot of these people, I've had people come up to me and say, listen, prior to this, we had a lot of negative stereotypes about gun owners, about firearms themselves, obviously brought upon by media, brought upon by movies, brought upon by, just in general, people's own stigmas that they build up within their own mind, people within the community. And living in a country like South Africa, we when we talk about crime and everybody being affected, it's kind of, people find it hard to differentiate between legal gun owners and illegal gun owners, not for any fault on our part. It's just that, once they've made something a villain, that's the villain. The gun is the villain, and they don't look deeper into it and understand there's actually more to it than just that. So people have come onto my course saying, listen, you've actually opened my eyes a little bit. And from here, it just kind of grew. And I decided, maybe it's time I put something on paper and actually offer training courses tailored for gun owners, specifically adhering to firearms. Now, in terms of my background and how I got into firearms, I've always had that defensive mindset, if I can call it that. And there are three different sectors within the firearm industry that exist, in the three ways which you can license a firearm. So one is obviously the most popular, being self-defense. The second is sport shooting, and the third is hunting. And all kind of are related in some instances, but they're also independent in other instances. So I've always been the more defensive side. So anything that I do has always had that, that intention behind it. Even if I was involved in sport shooting and everything else, it was always with the mindset of improving myself from a defensive standpoint. Yes, we can get into hours-long arguments about sport shooting versus the real world and so on and so forth, but I've always been an advocate of training is better than no training, and your intention and how you decide to use that training will always determine how beneficial that training is for you. So having attended numerous tactical defensive training courses, for lack of a better term, which is structured very differently to a sports shooting event. The outcomes and your outcomes and your objectives are very different to a sports shooting event. But it is, once again, you take what's necessary and discard what's not. So having attended a lot of these and having attended sports shooting events and a few times actually competed, when I say competed, attended shoots that were of a higher nature to see the skill level of other guys, there were certain things that I picked up where I said, here are people who are quite serious about shooting, and a few of them were actually lacking certain things. When I say lacking, I'm talking about guys who may even be better shooters than me, but they could have been even better than what they were based on certain factors. For example, from a defensive standpoint, you see a lot of guys passionate about firearms, guys who own multiple firearms, guys who are passionate about defensive training, guys who take their self-protection, their self-preservation seriously. But certain basic things are lacking. For example, at 7 meters, you should be able to hit a target in the center mass without much interference, without much thinking. It's a simple drill. 7 meters, draw fire. You should have a decent grouping. And people have got all the gear, but lacking accuracy. For some reason, it's just not possible to put shots in the A block at 7 meters. It's not because now, this is a bad shooter. It's just that over the years, what has happened, people have developed bad habits, number one. Number two, haven't been taught the correct thing in the first place. Or number three is just that they know what to do. They've got everything. They've had the training. They've got the solid grounding, but they just fail to implement it properly. Now, what I'm referring to is fundamentals. The ultimate objective with any type of shooting, whether it be hunting, sport shooting, or self-defense, is always accuracy. That's your final objective. There's nothing else that is more important. Speed is important. Power is important. Capacity, caliber, all the things are important. But ultimately, you want to be able to hit on target what you're shooting at. Yeah. Your 7 fundamentals, which are the basics of shooting, are all geared towards making sure that you are hitting your target accurately. After seeing this and realizing there's a bit of a need, I decided to offer a training course called Back to Basics. Not very original, but it fits the profile.
Yeah, it's got a nice ring to it.
So basically taking people of any level of shooting, but they must be a gun owner, because if they're not a gun owner, it's almost just like it doesn't really make sense to bring a person who's not carrying a firearm, who doesn't own a firearm. It's not gonna hit home the same way. A gun owner of any level, whether a guy's owned a gun for 25 years or the guy who's just picked up his gun the day before, this training course was designed for that person. Whereas I'm saying, listen, this is who I am, this is what I offer. I'm not claiming to be any high-level instructor of any sort. I consider myself a student. Neither am I a provincial or South African level Springbok shooter of any sort. I am just a participant, but this is what I can offer you. And I give you the opportunity in a controlled environment where we rehash those fundamentals and reinsert them and make sure that those are solid. Because once you have a solid foundation, everything else becomes easy after that. You just build on from there. So having my full attention, or not just mine, any instructor's full attention for a full 30 minutes or a full 1 hour while shooting, that's invaluable. You can't put a price to that. Just having somebody there to iron out all your kinks. So the good thing about the type of training that I do is that I don't consider it very high level, but I think its importance is right up there in terms of everything else that exists. The good thing about it is that once you've done the training with me, you don't necessarily have to keep coming back to renew that training. There are drills or skills or type of things that you can do that you're like, okay, listen, this is what I'm going to do, and now I can practice this every weekend or every second weekend, and it doesn't require tons of ammunition. Box of 50 rounds of ammunition, go to the shooting range, and there's specific drills that you need to work on. In a controlled environment, it can be constructive for you.
So you've been in the consumerism environment for quite a while now. What kind of patterns have you picked up with regards to buying firearms, civilians buying firearms?
So I'm going to throw a figure at you, and this was told to me years ago when I just gotten into the industry, which is almost 10 years ago. And someone threw this figure at me, and like I say, it's not an official statistic of any sort, but it's something that gives you a grasp of how big the firearm industry is in South Africa. Somebody told me the firearm industry almost 10 years ago in South Africa was worth 6 billion rand in South Africa. That's a significant number. You can see where that figure comes from. You need to understand, firstly, we are South Africa. We've got a couple of things going for us. One is that we have a very high crime rate. That's the first starting point when it comes to South Africa. We've got, I think, is it the second highest murder rate in the world or something to that effect, or top 5, somewhere there. And obviously, that's murder. What about hijackings, kidnappings, housebreakings, muggings, petty theft? And there's a lot of crimes on a daily basis that aren't actually even reported by most people. And you see it when you communicate with people. They're like, listen, no, it's not even worth reporting the crime. If something gets stolen, replace it and go on. What are the police going to do anyway? It's not a good sentiment to have, but it's an indication that we're actually looking at statistics which aren't actually that true. So it could be actually higher than that. Yeah. So starting point is always crime. Crime is bad in South Africa. Therefore, people have come to the realization that, listen, when it comes to my personal defense and personal security, there's only so much that we can do before we have to actually own a firearm. So that is the one contribution to that big billion rand industry. The second thing is sport shooting. Has always been big in South Africa, in my opinion. We've got some legendary sport shooters over the years. We make some really good sport shooting products that we export to other countries. Even ammunition as well. We've made some good powders, some good ammunition over the years. And it's always been big, but it's always growing. People are always getting involved. You go for club shoots and you see the numbers, always cyclical, but they're always. Compared to 10 years ago, there's definitely more guys shooting. The third thing is hunting. We are Africa. It's safari and it's hunting and it's outdoors. It's all of that. So that contributes to that sector as well. We've got a massive safari industry. We get people, international tourists who pay millions of rands to come down to South Africa to hunt big game, to go on these trips and to go on hunting trips and so on and so forth. And even people who live here, there's people who literally, live off the land, eat what they kill type of thing. And it's so all of this kind of, comes together to create the firearm industry. Being behind the counter on a daily basis, dealing with customers on a daily basis, you can tell that the industry is booming in that specific sector. I think CFR released a statistics a couple of years ago. I think they received something like 12,000 applications on a monthly basis for firearms. So that is a significant number, and a majority of those applications are for self-defense. Obviously that also includes security companies and collectors and so on. But I mean, the number of self-defense gun owners in South Africa is significant. I think it's definitely more than a couple of million, or around a couple of million. What this tells us is that people are slowly realizing there is really only so much that you can do in terms of ensuring your family safety, your personal safety. And, at some point you have to take precautions, and this is ultimately what it is about. I think I'm not an expert on this, but I understand the concept. You look at security within different layers. So your layers of security. So you look at your outer security in terms of where you physically reside. You've got electronic gates, you've got cameras, barbed wire fencing, electric fencing, palisades, whatever the case may be. As you work your way in, you've got gates, doors, alarm systems, beams, and so on. And then you kind of get further in, trailer doors, and it kind of just goes from there. You can name it. Technology is improving at a rapid pace. And most people who sit in South Africa, in terms of the middle class people, we can afford some type of security, or we prioritize those expenses or those security features because we understand that it's necessary to be able to live. What happens when a criminal or a syndicate of people have already timed you, who've done their research, or who have taken a chance, whatever the case may be, the dice have been rolling and this is how it's fallen. They've bypassed all that security. They've gotten through your electric fencing. They've gotten through your gates. They've gotten through your doors. Now they are currently in your face. The police, let's not get into that. I don't want to badmouth the police, but the reality is that, what is the response call these days? 45 minutes or something to that effect? So it's ridiculous. So you can't rely on that. Security companies as well. They can be there within minutes, but within minutes, a lot of things can happen. And that too, we talk about security companies, there's only so much that they can do as well. There's only so much that they are authorized to do before the police have to get there. So people have realized, listen, okay, I've got all these security features in place. Now the guy's in my face, and now it's my responsibility to protect my family. I've got daughters, and I know that if something has to happen, it is my responsibility to protect them. They're going to look to me for security, comfort, and to keep them safe. So it's my responsibility, and people realize this, and they realize, listen, at the end of the day, when there is someone in front of you, when there is a threat in your face, there's only so many katas that you can do in karate, and there's so many times you can call the police, or there's so quickly you can have the speed dial for the security company. At some point, you have to be your own bodyguard. You have to be able to be prepared, equipped, and have the necessary skills and tools to be able to defend your life. On top of that, it was not just people who realized it, people who have actually been affected. We've had customers coming into the shop a week after being hijacked or kidnapped or broken into. I'm like, listen, I need a firearm. I have to actually start this process at some point. And it's not a nice thing, where you have to have the lesson first and then have the experience first and then take the lesson, as opposed to having the lesson and then taking the experience. It's not nice, but that's just life. Sometimes that's how it falls for you.
Next thing I want to ask you now. Let's. I want to put myself in a consumer's point of view and approach you as a firearms dealer. Let's for the sake of the exercise say something recently happened. People broke into our house. We got away with our lives, but a little shaken up. Obviously, going through the therapy, sorting that out. But now it's time to get a firearm. Where do we start?
So can I just mention a disclaimer before I say anything else? Obviously, whatever I say is my own personal opinion, based on some of it based on scientific facts, some of it based on opinion. This is not meant to put down any specific brand, any specific supplier or representation of anything else. It's just how I would advise a person And that being said, I'm a gun guy. So at the end of the day, as much as I prefer certain things, I love guns in general, and I feel that they are necessary. So I don't have a personal gripe with any specific brand or anything else, right? So firstly, within South Africa, we have a fair variety of brands. When it comes to handguns, which is obviously for defensive purposes, something that you would carry on you on a daily basis, something that you would keep near you in your home, something that's easy to conceal, something that is easy to train with, and something that is easy to just, to maintain and to keep going forward. Remember that when you purchase a firearm, just the license application can take 3 to 4 months minimum. So you don't want to be spending money on a gun that's going to take you 3 to 4 months to get, only for it to kind of break 6 months down the line, and now you have to start the process again, and now you're out of a gun. When I get a new customer, I always break it down into 3 categories in terms of when you're looking for a firearm. The first category you look at, or the first criteria you look at, is affordability. The reality is everybody has different levels of income, everybody has different priorities in their lives, people have to pay for different things, you've got kids. So you've got to look at affordability. Not everybody has the same amount of money to put down on a purchase for a firearm. Secondly, you got to look at availability, right? What is available? And because there's no point talking, hypothetically about something that is, you want this, but it's not available at all. You have to see what's available in South Africa and where we are. Third, there's 2 that kind of go hand in hand, is reliability and sustainability. Reliability, it's a funny one, because this is where a lot of the arguments come into play. People base their opinions on personal experiences, but they are sometimes not founded well enough. So reliability, obviously, you want something where, specifically for self-defense, you want something that is reliable. It must be able to perform under any circumstance, under any in any situation, under any condition. And what I mean by that is sometimes, when you're preparing for reality, everyone likes to prepare for an ideal situation. There you are 10 meters away and you draw and fire. Sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes it's the case of you actually have to wrestle a guy to the ground and then draw your gun, and then you have to fight with the guy. So if that's the case, if your gun ends up on the floor and ends up being kicked around for 2 minutes while you're wrestling the guy to get to the gun, and you pick it up, now it's full of dirt, will the gun actually function? Other instances is that you drop the gun. Does the gun have the necessary safeties to ensure that if you're carrying one in the chamber, the gun's not going to accidentally go off on its own and cause unnecessary harm? Let's talk about sustainability for a second. If you drop the gun during any type of altercation, whether it just be at the shooting range and loading the gun and now you drop it, or you decide to maintain the gun and clean it up, and now you've taken it apart and you either break a part, lose a part, or something is worn out, you need to be able to keep that gun going and repair it. So sustainability refers to how long can you keep that gun going by maintaining it, by changing parts, cleaning it, because like I mentioned before, this is not a short-term investment. You are spending thousands of rands, and it's taking you months to get this license, just so that you can use the gun for a few months, and then it's done after that. It becomes a paperweight. You want to look at something that has good aftermarket support, enough spares available for it to be able to make sure you can keep it running. Putting actual brands to the name, and this is going to be a hugely debated topic, but number one in globally, not just in South Africa, your first choice should always be Glock, in my opinion. There are different size Glocks for different size hands and different size people. And my recommendation would always be going with 9mm. 9mm, the reason why I would stick with 9mm as opposed to any other caliber, firstly, 9mm, or the dimension 9x19mm, is a NATO round. So our police in our military use that. So it's available. It's always going to be available. Within the Glock range, you've got maybe about 6 or 7 different types of 9mm, and each one would depend on you, which one would be your ideal one. But the most popular gun out of all the Glocks is the Glock 19. There's a reason for that. Although the Glock 17 is probably a better gun to shoot because being bigger and kind of, people like the feel in their hand better. The reality is that it's not just about how good the gun feels in your hand. There's no point having an excellent gun that feels great in your hand and great in your bedside table, but you struggle to conceal the weapon on a daily basis. Remember that part of the regulations and the law from the Firearms Control Act of 2000 says that when you are carrying a firearm, amongst the many conditions that you have to adhere to, one is that the firearm has to be completely covered. Covered may be the wrong word, but I understand what they mean by that. It should be more concealed, in my opinion. concealed is not just, covering the firearm, but nobody should know that you have the firearm. Where affordability is important when it comes to caliber is that if something is affordable, if the ammunition is affordable, you can afford to train more with that ammunition. You can afford to train more with that gun. Whereas opposed if you bought a gun that has a bigger bullet, for whatever purposes, you would not be able to afford to spend as much ammunition on that and as much in training. On the topic of 9mm versus a bigger caliber, and this is a weekly, if not a daily discussion that happens in any gun shop. And once again, views may differ, and I'm basing my views on scientific evidence. When a person sees a big 45 ACP bullet, they're like, oh my God, look at that, that's going to do damage. Yes, it's a big bullet, it makes a big hole, but you need to look at the holistic thing when you're looking at caliber. As much as, yes, it is a bigger bullet that makes a bigger hole, if you look at physics, force equals mass times acceleration. As much as you are getting the mass, because it's a bigger bullet, you are losing acceleration. So are you actually getting more force on that bullet every time you pull the trigger? That's something to take into consideration. On a bigger caliber like a 45, in a specific type of handgun, which is, if you assume this is the size of handgun I would want to carry, or assume a rough size of a handgun, if you had to fit a bigger bullet into that same gun that would take a 9mm, you are going to take less rounds of 45. So less rounds of a bigger caliber, more rounds of a smaller caliber like a 9mm. For me, I would rather take more. That means that my percentage of shots that need to be on target, that I can afford to not hit on target, if I can use that, lack of a better term, basically I've got more ammunition to shoot at. If I miss, I can keep shooting. Recoil, it's a real thing. Now look, when people tell me I'm inaccurate because of the recoil, people don't really understand how the firing sequence works. If you understand how the firing sequence works on a firearm, the bullet leaves the barrel, then the gun recoils. So how does recoil affect your trajectory? It doesn't. What is actually happening is that your anticipation of that recoil is causing you to be inaccurate. If that makes sense. Understand?
Yes.
So people are flinching, they're anticipating the shot going off, and they're flinching with the shot, and that's what's causing it. And yes, there is more recoil, don't get me wrong, but the recoil does not affect your accuracy. What it does affect is the speed of how you can shoot. It takes longer on a bigger caliber. It's more force coming up. It requires more force for you to bring it back down. It takes longer to bring the gun back down to rest to pull up the next shot. So it affects the speed of your shooting, and to some people who are less trained than others, it does affect accuracy because your anticipation of that recoil is causing you to be inaccurate. So between the availability of ammunition, the cost of ammunition, the recoil, I would rather just go for 9mm. That's the golden standard within the industry. One more box that they do tick, and this is where they really take the pie, in South Africa specifically, is the availability of spares and accessories for that firearm. After Glock, I think there is a lot of competition amongst the different brands, but I think definitely the second most popular brand, which then ticks all the boxes in terms of affordability, reliability, availability, sustainability, and in terms of caliber, size, and design, is definitely the CZ. The CZ, there's a wide variety of them. Also, I mean, you take the CZ75, which is probably one of the most iconic designs in terms of firearm within South Africa. Once again, ticking the boxes of availability. They're available. They usually are affordable. You're not going to pay an arm and a leg for them. In terms of reliability, they're definitely reliable. CZ don't make bad guns, so that you've got your Smith & Wessons, your Berettas, Canik, Gerson, and then probably after that you're going to get your Tauruses and maybe your other small branded guns within the industry. But Beretta, Smith, and Canik, Beretta, obviously Italian or US, depending where we're getting them from. Great weapons. Beretta, I think, are actually the oldest firearms manufacturers in the world at the moment that are still operational. So yeah, I forgot to mention another one. Sig Sauer. Sig Sauer also very good guns. Recently won a U.S. military contract for the chosen sidearm for the U.S. soldiers. Look, there are probably political reasons for that as well, but they're not crap guns. Things for Smith & Wesson definitely a good make. Spares magazines are available. Can be a little bit. Can be a little bit more expensive, but definitely something that you can find is, I think a couple of guys who represent Smith & Wesson in South Africa. Then there is Canik. Canik is also a good make. Canik is Turkish, just like Gershon or Gerson, depending how you want to say it. They really found themselves within the market being within a well affordable range. but each brand kind of understands its position within the market, and each has a new product that will always try and challenge the next one. And remember, at the end of the day, as much as we advise customers on what guns to buy and which way to go with everything, it also depends a lot on your preferences, and it's just a tool. As long as the tool works for the purposes that you are intending for it to work, that's sufficient. It doesn't have to be necessarily, something that's very fancy or something that you have to show off to your friends or whatever it is. It's a tool that needs to suffice for whatever purposes that you need for it. So as long as you are able to use it confidently, effectively, efficiently, and you are able to train with it on a regular basis, you've ticked all the boxes, and that's kind of how I would advise people in terms of what weapons to buy.
Luqman, thank you very much for your time and all the value that you've added into this video. I really, really appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the opportunity.